Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. This is the core of everything in whatever you're trying to achieve, is that you have to develop the skills to be successful in whatever that is. In business, you need to know how to sell, you need to know how to market, you need to know how to develop a product. In sports, you need to know how to read the field, how to handle the ball. But those are just skills that anyone can learn with enough time and effort. The biggest issue most of us face is not a lack of skills, it's the lack of discipline to actually develop the skills. So most of the videos on my channel are about developing those skills, what they should be. And we dive really deep into how to do those correctly. But this video is about developing a winning mindset so that you and I can achieve whatever we set out to achieve in life or in business. So we're going to be covering what I call the UDEB framework. So the U stands for understand. And there's two things you need to understand here. One is your brain, yourself, how it works. So when it comes to actually understanding yourself and your mind, you need to understand that there is a dark force holding you back. It's holding onto your heels, making it so you can't walk forward, can't achieve the goals that you want. Many psychologists will talk about the higher brain and the lower brain. The higher brain, which part of the higher brain is the neocortex, is in charge of attention, thought, perception, memory, things like that. Your lower brain or limbic system is responsible for survival and self-protection. And for simplicity's sake, this is also where your subconscious lives. So remember the quote I said earlier, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. So really what this whole thing comes down to is these two parts of the brain. Most people are letting the lower brain control 99% of their actions, and every once in a while, the higher brain will jump in. The key to unlocking success in any area of our life is just letting the higher brain actually call the shots. And of course, learning how to manage the lower brain effectively, because it's not going away anytime soon. So most people only end up taking action in their lives towards their goals when things become so painful that not taking action is more painful than taking action. So what we're going to cover in the rest of this framework is how to take action consistently, no matter what our circumstances, by putting the higher brain in charge of the lower brain. All right, so that's step one in the U part of the framework. Secondly, we need to understand a couple of key things about the world. The first one is the 80-20 principle. This principle is also called the Pareto principle after Wilfredo Pareto, who was an Italian economist that discovered, as he was looking at plants in his garden, that 80% of the fruit from the plants was produced by 20% of the plants that were actually there, and vice versa. So 80% of the plants produce 20% of the crops. And as we dive into it, we can see that this is actually everywhere. So 80% of the people live in 20% of the cities. 80% of the world is water, 20% is land. 80% of the wealth is held by 20% of the people. And 80% of the results we want to achieve in life come from 20% of our efforts. The reason I bring this up is that when you're a beginner trying to chase your dreams or develop any new skill, it seems like everything is important, but it's actually not. There are 20% of things that you can focus on to get 80% of the output, which will likely get you to your goal. So just keep that in mind. It'll make more sense as we go through the rest of the framework. And in addition to the 80-20 rule, there's one more rule that you need to understand about the world in order to have success, and that's feedback loops. So a feedback loop is a loop that just gets faster and faster and bigger as you work on it more and more. So a great example of this I heard recently is the popcorn analogy. When you put popcorn in the microwave, it doesn't pop hardly at all for about a minute. And then all of a sudden, one kernel pops, another pops, and then the whole bag is full almost immediately, it seems like. But without all of that work where nothing was happening, that wouldn't have been possible. Another example is this video I'm gonna put on the screen right now. So you can see in this video, this guy's dancing. He's dancing all by himself. And similar to the popcorn, oh, there's another kernel that starts dancing with him. Start dancing together. And it's just these two guys for a while. Eventually a third person joins them. We're about a minute into this so far. There we go, even more. Now there's a bunch of people that join. Even more people are dancing, even more. And then skip to the end of the video. There's so many people dancing. More people dancing than sitting down. So the reason I give that example is that it's a perfect illustration of how the world works. When you start a business or you start chasing after your dreams, you're going to be the only person there. You're going to be the only one, and you're going to look weird. You're going to look silly. But then eventually, as you adopt more and more people into your vision, or you just start doing more and more work, everything will start to come together and it will feed back on itself over and over and over again until there's tons of people enlisted in your vision or your success or whatever it is. So those are the two key things that you need to understand before you start chasing your dreams. There's 20% of efforts that I need to be focusing on, and it's going to take time before the feedback loop feeds back into itself enough for me to be as successful as I want to be. All right, so that brings us to the D in the framework, which is define. It is so important that we define what we actually want in crystal clear terms, because without it, we won't know what we're chasing. And eventually we'll realize, we'll wake up one day and see that our ladder that we're climbing is actually set on the wrong wall. I'll share mine so you get an example of how granular I'm getting. So this is my vision. I want a home in a place that fits me, near nature, good people, close enough to my family that I can visit them. I want a house in that area that's likely going to be worth $800,000 to $2 million. I want kids with 3 or 4 total. I'm not totally sure on that one yet. I want a business that I get to work on that just gets me fired up. And I want to work on it for about 30 hours a week. I think that's the ideal amount of time for me to work. I want this business to have problems I want to solve, customers I love serving, and products I believe 110% in. So those are all of the things I want. I've also written down that I believe my income needs to be between $600,000 and $1 million a year in order to achieve that. So the question that I asked there was, what do I want? The next question to ask yourself is, why do I want it? This is a very interesting question, and it's going to get deep. You might find yourself answering that, oh, I don't actually want what I wrote down. I think my mom wants that goal, or somebody else wants that for me. Then you're going to have to go revisit what you really want out of your life. For me, I want these things because I know they'll actually make me happy. Running a relatively stress-free business with lots of free time and the ability to change people's lives almost every single day and spend time with my family in the evenings and also during the day if I'd like to do that, like that will make me happy. I know it will. And I know that because I've spent time chasing other things like only success in business that haven't made me super happy. And a little disclaimer here, could I be happy on much less than I described? Absolutely. But this is about defining our dreams, not just our baselines. So the next question we need to ask ourselves is, who do we need to become to get the dream that we have defined? This is really interesting because you're not asking, how do I achieve the dream? No, you're asking, what type of person would just achieve this dream anyway? And then we work on becoming that person, and that person naturally has the dream that we want. So for me, somebody that's an excellent marketer, a driven entrepreneur, and a generally happy person would have the life that I just described. So when I'm looking at decisions in my life, I ask myself, what would a driven, dedicated, disciplined entrepreneur do here? Not what would I do here? And then I start taking actions that are a little bit different than the current version of myself would do, and I start growing in that way. All right, so that's it for the define section. And once we're super clear on those things, we can start to progress and evolve to what we want most, which is the E in the framework, evolve. This is where the work really starts. So we're going to go back and discuss the subconscious now, which is where most of this work actually takes place. So inside of your lower brain, in the limbic system and also parts of the basal ganglia, is your subconscious. This is where your deepest rooted beliefs and feelings about yourself, the world, and others live. That is your subconscious. This is the thing that directs your actions without you even knowing that it's doing it. So many of these beliefs and feelings are developed during our early years of life to help protect us. So for example, you might believe, I'm only destined for a certain level of success. And that would be developed during your childhood to help protect you from a failure that you had. You might believe that selling, for example, is very slimy and you would never want to be a salesperson. You might believe at your core that money is actually very bad or success is bad. And so you don't want anything to do with them. So here's the thing about these beliefs. We develop them when we're younger and then we never learn to grow out of them because our brain craves the familiar. It doesn't matter if it's hurting us. It doesn't matter if it's causing every single problem we have in life, because we know what it's like to not take action, to not achieve our goals, to just stay in the same destructive habits over and over again. Then we just do that because that's easier than figuring out what life is like on the other side. If you have the option of going to a restaurant that you've been to before, or a restaurant that you're just not quite sure if you're going to like, you may take the gamble, I don't know, 25% of the time on the new restaurant. But the old restaurant is probably going to be the one you choose because you know what you're going to get. That's how our brain works. We're always evaluating the pros and cons of going with something that's familiar or easy and something that's going to require more effort. Even if that effort isn't as much as the other side, we'll stick with the most familiar thing. So here's a diagram of how this works. So here we have the beliefs. Beliefs lead to thoughts. Thoughts then lead to our actions every day. And then our actions lead to our results in life. It's pretty simple, but this is a feedback loop like we talked about earlier. So every time we have a belief and we think something in accordance with that belief and we act in accordance with that belief and thought, and we get the result from that action, it reinforces the belief again and the thought again and the action again until we get in very, very deep ruts just following the same pattern, but it all starts at the beliefs level. So the key to our growth here becomes cutting off the negative beliefs at the source so that our thoughts change and then our actions change and then our results in life change. So how do we do that? The answer is we brainwash our subconscious to believe the things that serve us and help us get to our goals. So for example, if we're trying to start a business and we believe that money is bad, it's going to be hard to start a business. So we would rewrite that belief as money is a means of exchange of value. If I provide value to someone else, I deserve to be paid for that. That's a great belief to have. Next up, another belief I brought up is being a salesperson is slimy. We could change that to selling people on products that actually help them is not slimy at all. And then lastly, we have I'm not smart or good at anything, or I'm destined for X level of success. We could say I can outwork anyone and learn anything I put my mind to. So you might be thinking, Keaton, well, that's nice, you can say that, but I think I actually need to believe that in order to succeed. And you're right. But there's a relatively easy way to let yourself start believing these things. And it's through essentially just repeating it enough times to our subconscious that our subconscious starts to believe it. And we can do that in two ways. Actually verbally repeating it to ourselves, and then also taking the actions that show our subconscious that this belief needs to be adjusted. An example of the first one is subliminals or affirmations. You can write down a list of 50 things that you need to believe to have the success you want in life. And then every time when you wake up, your subconscious is a little closer to the surface after you wake up from sleeping. You just plug those in your ears and you listen to them for 5 minutes every morning, and then you start believing at some level that these things are true. It's not going to complete until you actually start taking action, but this can kickstart a lot of things and set them in motion so that the action is a little bit easier to take. And that's it, guys. That's how you hack that feedback loop. You attack the beliefs at the source, you start believing a little bit differently, and then you start taking actions in accordance with those new beliefs, and those results prove those beliefs to your subconscious, and then you start thinking differently, acting differently, and getting the results differently that you want in your life. All right, so that brings us to the last step in the framework, which is B, and it stands for become. This is the mindset you must have about the time it will take and the effort you must put in to have success. So the first thing when it comes to becoming is we must understand how to fail well. One of my favorite entrepreneurs is Alex Hormozy, and he talks about how when people start out at a certain skill, they suck at it. And he says, of course you suck at it. It would be unreasonable for you to be good at sales on your first time selling someone. It would be unreasonable for you to be good at soccer the first time you play soccer. And instead of saying, I want to be good at something immediately, we say, what amount of work would I have to put in for it to be unreasonable for me to be successful at that thing? And then you just start putting the reps in. If you're not good at sales, start selling. If you're not good at marketing, start marketing. If you're not good at English, start speaking it. You should expect to fail on your first time. Honestly, your first 1,000 times. Wrong, bad, ugly. That's what you should be trying to get. You should learn to fail first and then start developing from those failures until you're actually successful. As my good friend Winston Churchill says, success is just going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm. What we need to understand is that every single action we take has a delayed consequence. From the input to the output, there is time between there. And if we're not consistent, we might give up before we actually see the results. So let's give an example here. Somebody's trying to start a business and they're reaching out to other business owners to pitch their service. Let's say they reach out to 10 people today. Probably none of them are going to get back to them the same day. But let's say over 2 weeks, 5 people get back to them. And of the 5, 4 say I'm not interested. 1 says, sure, we can talk about it. but they don't become a customer right away. So what does this person do? Does he give up because he reached out to 10 people and one person actually was interested and then it turned out they weren't interested right away? No, what that person should do is instead reach out to 10 businesses a day, every weekday for a year. So that would be 2,600 businesses. And of those 2,600 businesses, how many of them do you think might need his product or service at some point? Absolutely, some of them will at some point. So what does this business owner do? He figures out how to stay in front of them, and when they're ready to buy, they buy from him. I would say very humbly that this is one of my strengths as an entrepreneur. I understand that all I have to do is show up and plant seeds every day. I just have to do a little bit of work over and over and over again. And then what do you know? I've made $2 million. Like, it's not rocket science. It's just so easy to give up that most people don't make it past those first few months of failure. In addition to this, I need to mention that part of being consistent is avoiding burnout. So let's say in our hypothetical example that our friend James is starting a business, his comfort zone is this circle that you see on the screen. If he just went for it all out, wanted to start his business, was going to have success right away, he might take action on this level of a circle. That's not what he should do. Instead, he should shrink that and just go barely outside of his current abilities. Something that's not in his comfort zone, but isn't going to burn him out immediately. We might compare them by looking at this kind of a graph. James, if he takes a ton of action right away and then eventually burns out and stops working on his business, might look like this. Whereas our other friend Jill starts out her business slowly, learns to take action in the right ways, and eventually there's a crossover point where Jill is having more success than James and she's less burned out because she just acts on the edge of her current abilities for a long enough period of time that it was unreasonable for her not to be successful. Now, there are some crazy entrepreneurs out there and people who just have success super quickly because they work really, really hard, but I can guarantee they've had episodes of crazy burnout. And I can almost guarantee as well that for about 99% of people, this is the correct way to approach it. 1% better every day is better than 50% better every day until you burn out, and then you're 0% better every day. Another note to go along with this is that your lower brain will freak out if you try to push it too hard, too fast. For those of you who are hopped up on dopamine and like never have pushed yourselves to do difficult things, once you start pushing yourself to do those difficult things, your lower brain is going to be like, this is not fun, and it's going to push back, it's going to rebel, it's not familiar, it's not fun. And if you're not careful and you approach it too fast, that lower brain is going to sabotage you and you're not going to have the success that you want. And at the end of the day, that's really the whole process of achieving your goals. You just keep proving it to yourself over and over and over again. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this one where I talk about how I made my first million online and how you can too. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video.